school. A prank pretending to be a ghost and making people frightened had caught on through SNS. In my case, I was still young at that time. I also wanted to try that prank, so that evening, I went to the stairway of the apartment's emergency exit, crouched down on the stair, and waited for the people to come in. Just then, I saw a boy coming to the emergency exit. He didn't say anything, but just stared at me. I thought it was a perfect time, so I decided to play a prank on him. "Do you see me?" I was laughing up my sleeve, and then I suddenly saw his chilling grin. "Wow, you see me too?" As soon as he asked me back, I felt like my mind went blank at that moment. The exit was completely dark. Then the sensor lights once blinked. When I looked forward, there was a boy standing in a weird position that people could not even try. He was staring at me with his body facing the exit and his neck turning 180 degrees. I jumped up to the exit in fear. As soon as I turned around before opening the door, I saw his head begin to turn slowly, staring at me with a curious look. And then I could barely get out from there. When I was in high school, I was on my way home after finishing my night study. It was late at night when I finally got home. I was about to turn on the light, then I saw my mom was staring at me from the front porch. "Mom, why are you standing there? Come out." Speaking naturally, I walked towards the kitchen to drink some water and then found a note on the table. "I'm going to attend a night meeting. Eat your dinner with your brother." What? Then who is she? My heart dropped. I thought I should not stay here anymore. However, I was terrified that it would follow me right away if I tried to run at that moment. So I slowly began to walk across the living room toward the front door. And it was still standing in the same position, but only its eyes kept following my moving. I left the house in my bare feet the moment I arrived at the front door, and then immediately called my older brother, and what he told me was a pure shock. "Did you see that?" Turns out my brother had come home earlier. It is said that the thing on the back porch was standing in the main room when he first came inside, and it was staring at him through the open door. He also said that the whites of its eyes looked abnormally large, and the black part of the eyeball was so small, as if only the pupils were left. My brother and I had to stay up all night in the PC room until Mom finally came back that day.
I'm from West Virginia, and I moved all the way to Lexington, Kentucky for a girl. Now, that might be, well, the scariest part of the story, that a dude from West Virginia moved over the border to Kentucky, and only for a girl, but I assure you, it gets worse. A lot worse. She was super affectionate when we first got together, like I couldn't have wished for a better girlfriend. But as time went on and we got more secure in the whole thing, that affection dropped off to next to nothing. It was a slow process, almost like a leaky bucket or something. I barely noticed the relationship dropping off bit by bit until one day I just realized that there was nothing left of us. We were like roommates more than anything, hardly spent any time together, didn't actually get intimate for like months at a time, and in the end, sleeping in the same bed as her was so depressing that I ended up just staying on the couch. Not long after I started calling the couch my bed, we broke up formally. It sucked, but I saw it coming a long way off, and it wasn't entirely unwelcome. And that's when I started talking to this girl on Reddit. Now, I should make it perfectly clear that I was never ever unfaithful to my girlfriend, only when we broke up, I was so starved for affection and female attention that I looked for it wherever I could. I wasn't confident for dating apps, I don't think, so Reddit's anonymity suited me just fine. Eventually, me and this girl that I met on the r/gaming sub swapped numbers and actually started planning to meet. She lived over in Arizona, but flying down there to meet her didn't seem like a big deal at all. Not when she was so nice and pretty too. I remember staying up super late talking to her one night, trying to keep my voice down so my ex wouldn't hear. We planned all the stuff we'd do together, all the places that she'd take me in Phoenix, all the bomb Mexican food we were going to eat. I was excited, and I went to sleep smiling, but I sure didn't wake up that way. I woke up to loud crashing noises just feet away from me in the TV room. At first, I thought it was a home invasion or something, but when I looked around, it was her, my ex, and she was smashing my Xbox with a baseball bat over and over again. I screamed at her, asking her what she thought she was doing, then went to grab my phone so I could call the cops. Only it wasn't on the coffee table, where I usually put it on charge every night. It was nowhere to be seen. That's when my ex started ranting about how I'd been cheating, how she knew everything, and then mentioned the Reddit girl by name before she swung at me with the baseball bat. I fell backwards over the couch trying to avoid the strike, and I did, but Jesus Christ, the whole rush of air as it went past my face just about put the fear of God into me. She chased me around the apartment, swinging that bat as hard as she could until I locked myself in our bathroom. I thought I might be able to reason with her from the other side of the door, to be able to actually explain that the Reddit girl was someone I started talking to after we broke up. But she actually tried to bash the door down, and I'm still amazed that she didn't manage it. Like it was legit like that scene from The Shining. She bashed a hole in one of the wood panels and proceeded to scream through that. Thank God it wasn't big enough for her to reach through and unlock the door, otherwise I'd have been in some serious trouble. Eventually she calmed down enough to stop trying to kill me, but she wanted me out of the apartment, like that night. I didn't even gather everything up. I just threw some essentials into a bag and got out of there. I kept imagining her sneaking up with a kitchen knife or something, catching me off guard and then just stabbing me to death or something. I've had friends ask me why I didn't just restrain her, why I was so scared of a girl. But that's about the dumbest response I've ever had to this whole story. A swing from that bat or a stab wound in the right place, it wouldn't have mattered what was or wasn't dangling between a person's legs. I'd have been dead as a doornail. I got out of there pretty fast, drove to a motel, then tried and failed to sleep through the rest of the night. The next morning, I called my mom in West Virginia, told her everything, and arranged to stay with her for a little while until I could get back on my feet. I'd have gone back to the apartment to get the rest of my things if I didn't think that she'd either smashed or burned everything I owned. Besides, I was just happier to be out of there by that point, and I'll tell you another thing. I have never, ever been back to Kentucky since then. I'll wait until Tyler Childers comes back round to Virgie, rather than bring up all those bad memories.
Three Scary Stories, animated. 1. The Man in My Dream. I've been having a nightmare for 10 years. The same guy keeps appearing in my dream, and every day he's coming to me little by little. At first I think he was apparently standing outside the room, but now he was staring at me, blinking in front of me, and it was just yesterday. I've been getting used to having this nightmare for 10 years, but now I feel like I'm going to die. If I fall asleep tonight, I think he'll come one step closer, and he'll finally kill me. 2. The Feet in the Mirror. 6 years ago, in the winter, I was arranging my bangs looking at the mirror next to the elevator after class. There was a staircase reflecting in the mirror behind me at that time. After I had my bangs adjusted for a long time, I glanced at the stairs in the mirror and then noticed that there's a white feet at the top of the stairs. Stupid, who the heck is going around with barefoot in this weather? I was wondering who it was, so I looked back and there was no one there. My heart sank and my whole body became stiff at that moment. I thought I was mistaken, so I looked back into the mirror, but those feet were still there. And it even came down a couple of steps more. I got goosebumps, burst into tears, and then ran out of the spot screaming. I never look in the mirror when I'm alone ever since that day. What was that foot? 3. The Man in the Subway. I used to go to the academy by subway. One day I was sitting at the end of the seat by the door and an old man was sitting right next to me. Then the subway stopped at one station. The moment the door in front of me opened, the guy came in from the side door of me at the same time. The door next to me won't be able to open due to the system, so how could a person come in through there? I still remember this moment vividly. When I glanced slightly to the side, he was wearing a sweatshirt, and I could see that he was just standing there with a blank look. The old man sitting next to me said to me, who was staring blankly at the man, "Kid, you have to pretend not to see that thing." This incident happened when I was around 10 years old. Every half term, we would have a week off from school, and it's very common for families to go on safari in places like Tsavo or Masai Mara as I was living in Kenya, Africa. It was basically like a tradition for my family to go with this other family since they had a camp which they were trying to develop at the same time near Tsavo National Park. And it was perfect because you didn't have to pay for the park entrance fee, which costs $90 per day. Since this camp was on the border of the national park, you could see everything, like lions, leopards, buffaloes, elephants, whatever things without paying a cent. So on a Friday afternoon, my dad filled up his Land Rover with all the necessities like beer, steaks, water, some sodas, and we started to follow the other family's car to Tsavo. If you were really lucky, you can get there within 4 hours, but most of the time it took almost 8 hours. Because there was just one road to get there, and since I was living in a developing country, the traffic was like a hell. So we finally got there in the middle of the evening. My dad was really eager to set up a barbecue for the steaks and have a bit of wild time with the other adults while I and my friend with her younger brother were playing on the picnic table. The camp was very basic style. It had mud huts with mosquito netting windows just to protect us a little bit from the mosquitoes, but the bathrooms were outside in the open without much privacy. And there were a couple of rangers taking turns to walk around the camp, just to make sure that the electric fence was working right and the entrance to the camp was clear. So while my dad was grilling at the barbecue, one of the rangers, who I've known since I was a toddler, came to us and told about the safari horror stories. It was how a leopard dragged its prey in one of these rooms, or how he got his various deep scars from wild animals, something like this. After he told us this, he shone his flashlight towards the darkness beyond the electric fence. I could see various reflecting eyes, some smaller, some larger. As a kid, I was terrified, but the adults were continuing their conversation. Around 11 p.m., I decided to go to the bathroom. With my flashlight, I could see there were loads of scorpions on the ground. As I was walking down the path to the bathrooms, I shone my light towards the fence, and I saw the back of the lion behind the bushes, which means they were much closer to us than what we had expected. I rushed back without peeing and told my parents and the rangers what I saw, and the rangers sent us off to our designated rooms immediately. I was in the hut with my friend and her family, and my dad was with my stepmom. Each parent had a walkie-talkie that had direct contact with the rangers. During that night, I could hear the commotion through the walkie-talkies, but I just shrugged it off. Around 1 a.m., I was dying to pee, so I woke my friend's dad to go with me because obviously I was terrified to go by myself. Trying his best to reassure me, he said that I couldn't go right now. I couldn't understand why he said that, so I kept questioning why. As I was getting frustrated that I couldn't hold it any longer, his walkie-talkie was suddenly on and we could clearly hear the ranger's urgent voice. "Sir, do not leave your room. There is a lion right in front of your hut's door." We then both froze. I could hear grunting with the occasional lion's call. For those who have never been on safari or have never heard a lion's calling, when it is that close to you, you can feel the roar vibrating your bones. I was in so much shock that I couldn't even cry. I held my breath for what felt like an eternity, and well, to tell the truth, I even peed myself a little bit at that time. Then we heard scratching and sniffing from under the door, which caused my friend to wake up and start screaming. When she was about to scream, her dad immediately covered her mouth to try to make it as silent as possible and calm her down. We all realized that this situation could end badly. We were in a small mud hut with bunk beds, and just behind the door was an over 190-kilogram lion being curious to see what's inside. Suddenly, we hear gunshots. I guess it was from the rangers. And then there was a silence, maybe about 5 minutes. All I could hear was the cricket in the far distance. Abruptly, the walkie-talkie started with one of the rangers' voices that the lion, which got scared from the gunshots, had left the camp. However, they also told there was still one other lion around the camp, so they were searching for it to drive it out. At that moment, I heard my stepmom screaming from the top of her lungs in company with gunshots. That's when we started to worry, so my friend's dad was constantly talking with the rangers to figure out if she was safe. Luckily, nothing happened to her. It turned out that she woke up because of the first set of gunshots. And when she was about to go back to sleep, she saw the lion with 2 glancing eyes and a black mane staring from outside the mosquito window at her, which caused her to scream. Eventually, the lion ran away from the place, being surprised at the second gunshot by the rangers. We were able to come back safely from the camp. However, I've been gotten goosebumps whenever I think about that incident. I'm just glad that I didn't try to go out by myself.
A coworker told me this unforgettable story about his time in high school. I'm going to write this from his perspective. Central High School in Springfield, Missouri is haunted. I know what you're thinking. Every kid says their school is haunted. But my story is different. I saw it. Central was actually the first high school in Springfield. The original brick building with its tower still stands, but has now expanded with many new wings. We'd all heard the stories about the steam tunnels that connected the buildings and the supposed hangings, but far more compelling was the story of the deadly principal who would whip troublesome students to death. That would have happened long ago when Springfield was a small town, and not the Queen City of the Ozarks. We had heard the rumors, the stories that were likely exaggerated, but being high schoolers, we knew we had to do one thing: be at the school late at night. I was the one who came up with the idea that we needed to join the drama class. They were preparing a performance of South Pacific, and as I explained to my group of friends, the way to get in would be to join the class as stagehands, stay to clean up after the performance, and then just stay. And that was what we did. Well, only a couple of us actually got onto the crew, but after everyone else had left, letting the others in was simple. We split up into 3 pairs, myself and Sarah, Rich and Paul, and Michelle and Dan. We didn't have flashlights, and this was before we had cell phones, but the moonlight from the windows and the familiarity of the halls allowed us to get around the school very easily. After about an hour, we began to think perhaps the stories were just stories. We began to make our way to the gymnasium. We started to compare experiences, but everyone said the same thing. They hadn't seen anything, nor heard anything strange. And that's when a chair flew across the gym and slammed into the wall. What the heck? I gasped before I saw something else. Swarms of glittering little things crawling across the floor. They were cockroaches. We'd see cockroaches in the gym on occasion, but usually 1 or 2, not hundreds. "Let's get out of here," yelled Michelle, and we hurried to the nearest exit, a stairway leading up to the 2nd floor. It wasn't until we got upstairs that we realized that going upstairs probably wasn't the best course of action, but the cockroaches didn't seem to follow us there. As we stood next to a classroom, catching our breath, we heard loud footsteps down the hall. All of us backed up against the wall, trying to let whatever this was just pass by. As the loud, plodding footsteps came nearer, our tension grew higher. "Oh, screw this," Rich said, and he ran into a classroom, Sarah following quickly after him. The door slammed shut behind them. "Guys!" I called. I almost didn't notice that the footsteps had stopped. Suddenly, we heard them scream and something slammed against the wall. And then something else hit it. They kept on screaming. Paul pulled at the door, but the handle was stuck. Finally, after a few minutes of them screaming and something hitting the wall, it opened. We entered the classroom. All the desks and chairs were knocked over, and some had clearly been hitting the walls. How they'd gone that far was a mystery, as they were pretty heavy. We found Sarah crouched in a corner crying and babbling incoherently, a puddle of moisture underneath her. Rich, on the other hand, was stumbling toward the window. "Get him!" I called, and Dan ran towards Rich, grabbing him. "Let me go. Just let me jump. Let me die," Rich cried. "Guys, this is enough," I said. "We need to get out of here." Michelle and Paul helped Sarah up, and helping Dan with Rich, we made our way back into the hall. As we stepped into the hallway, all at once, all the doors slammed shut. Then they all opened again and slammed again. "Screw this," Michelle yelled, and she and Paul began hurrying down the stairs, supporting Sarah between them. Dan ran after them, and I pulled Rich after me. The cockroaches downstairs had seemingly dispersed as we made our way to the nearest exit. Pushing at the door, nothing seemed to happen. "Come on, push it!" Michelle yelled, and Paul, Dan, and I struck the door together, forcing it open. We pulled Sarah and Rich outside, and as we made our way to the cars, we heard the door behind us slam shut. Dan helped Rich to his car while Michelle and Paul brought Sarah to the car they'd arrived in. As for me, I ran to my own car. As I was about to climb inside, I happened to look back at the school, looking at the tower. There, in the top room, was a window. And very clearly, I could see the outline of someone looking out the window directly at us as we made our escape. It was then I realized the most horrifying thing of all, that we knew there was something in the high school. It knew we knew, and we had to go back to class on Monday.
My name is Eric, and this happened to me when I was around 7 or 8 years old. One summer, my dad took me to a campsite for a long weekend. When we arrived, there were some kids around my age playing in a small park. I looked at my dad and he said, "Go ahead." So my dad unpacked the car and I went to maybe make some friends. There were 2 boys in the small park. I said hello and they said hello back. Their names were Kevin and Graham. Graham had to go shortly after because his parents were calling for him. So Kevin and I hung around and we talked about things we liked and how long we were staying at the campsite. After about an hour, Kevin's mom was calling for him, so we had to leave. I was about to head back to my dad when a boy appeared from the woods. He said hello. I said hi back. He introduced himself as Daniel. He seemed like a nice kid and we got along pretty well. He asked me if I wanted to play hide and seek, so I said yes. We played hide and seek at the campsite for maybe 45 minutes until I told him I had to go, so I went back to my dad and went to the camper. I told my dad I had made some friends, and my dad asked where their campers were. I told him where Kevin and Graham's were, but I never asked where Daniel was. I thought maybe, well, I'll see him the next day and I'll ask him then. So the next day I went outside to see if any of the kids wanted to play. Kevin and Graham were both unavailable. I was about to just return back to my camper when Daniel appeared out of nowhere, out the woods. We greeted each other, and I asked him if he wanted to play hide and seek again. He said yeah, but he said we should play at his house. I asked him where his house was, and he told me it's not far, it's just through the woods. I followed Daniel in the woods toward his house. We were walking for ages, and one thing that I found unusual was the more we walked, the less talkative and distant Daniel became. Eventually, we exited the woods, and Daniel said, "Here we are." He pointed at a rundown old house with a white van parked beside it. He started walking toward it. I slowly followed and asked Daniel, "So this is your house?" He replied by saying, "Yeah, let's go play hide and seek." I got this bad feeling. It became worse the closer we got to the house. It didn't look like a normal house. I started to notice that there were people standing by the windows inside the house. I asked Daniel if that was his dad in the window, and he said, yeah. Don't worry about him. He's harmless," and just continued walking. I don't know what it was, but something made me slow down. Daniel was by the front door at this point, and when he turned around, asked me if I was coming. I told him I had to go. I turned around and ran through the forest and back to my camper. I spent the next few hours watching TV. Then I got bored and decided to go back outside. I knocked on Graham's door, but he wasn't available. I knocked on Kevin's door, and his dad told me he was already out with some boy named Daniel. So I went back to the camper and did something else with my time. Late that night, there was a knock on our door. It was Kevin's parents. They asked if we had seen Kevin anywhere, as he's been gone for hours. I asked his mom if she had checked Daniel's house, and she said no because she didn't know where Daniel lived. I showed Kevin's parents along with my dad and a few other people through the woods to Daniel's house. When we got there, the van was gone. And when we knocked on the door, there was no answer. And the whole house was empty and abandoned. We didn't find Kevin for the rest of our time at the campsite, and he's still missing to this day as far as I know. I thought then, and still think today, that Daniel was some kind of bait to lure kids in the same age as him to be kidnapped. And I'm thankful my gut sensed danger and told me to leave.
It was on August 6th. I came back home after work thinking of taking a long sleep during the weekend. As soon as I arrived home, I washed up quickly, lay down in bed, and slept right away. And the time was around 7 p.m. But when I opened my eyes for some reason, it was at 2 a.m. I was wondering why I woke up so early, since I usually fall asleep on weekends and no one can wake me up. However, I decided to drink water while I was up anyway. So I got out of my bed, went to the kitchen, and lay in bed to sleep again. Just then, it was something furry, I think, and it touched my back. No, it can't be. I used to lie on my side and sleep. I opened my eyes for a while because of the strange feeling, but soon I decided to just ignore it without much thought. However, that was not an illusion. I could feel someone kept touching my back. It seemed to be rough, and there was even something sticky about it. My heart dropped, and I slowly looked back. There was a man lying there. I was sweating like the cold sweat was coming out of all the holes in my body. I've never seen such an awful look in my life. I could see his hair turned all white. The skin all came off. His mouth and nose were all crushed that I couldn't recognize his face. And he was staring at me, just like that. I opened my eyes screaming and then realized it was a dream. Because of sweating a lot, I got thirsty, so I went to the kitchen drinking some water again. I lay down thinking that was the end of the nightmare. But it wasn't. I had to go through the same situation 2 more times. In the first dream, I also got up in surprise, but the second one was different. Somehow, I was courageous and eventually talked to the person. "Why are you doing this to me?" Then he beckoned to me instead of answering, and it felt as if he were asking me to follow him. "If I follow you, you won't be in my dreams anymore?" He nodded and headed to the kitchen. So I followed him, and he pointed his finger to the refrigerator. And this time he pointed to a clear glass bottle when I opened it. He then opened his mouth and said for the first time, "I know you are thirsty. Drink it." It was just a dream. However, I was so scared that I couldn't reject it. So I ended up drinking the water in the bottle. After I finished drinking, he asked me to send him off and said that he would no longer come. Unwillingly, I opened the front door and went with him. Even though my house was an apartment, there were no elevators and stairs in my dream, and we went straight out to the yard. And it was weird that my whole body began to sweat while I was walking on the flatland while sending him off. I finally arrived at the front gate and tried to take a step forward to see him leaving, but I was clearly blocked by something, even though there was nothing in front of me. He kept beckoning, but it was no longer possible to move forward. Just then, I felt the water dripping on my head, and then I ended up waking up. As soon as I opened my eyes, my legs suddenly throbbed, and the moment I came to my senses, I was purely shocked. I was on the rooftop and kept bumping my thighs and knees on the railing that was blocking right in front of me to move forward. The rainwater woke me up, saving my life just before I was almost falling from the rooftop and killing myself. The rooftop door, which was supposed to be locked, was also open for some reason. Being terrified, I ran home without even thinking about using the elevator. I was out of breath after entering the house, so I opened the refrigerator again and started drinking water. Meanwhile, I suddenly remembered the glass bottle that he made me drink in my dream. So I checked what it was, and to my surprise, it was a whiskey which I used to drink when I couldn't sleep. And the bottle was definitely full until yesterday, but there was not a sip left. To sum up, I couldn't wake up because he made me drink that whiskey. And the reason I had a hard time walking when I sent him off was that I was actually walking toward the rooftop. If my body hadn't actually caught on the roof railing, I would have killed myself and said goodbye to the world. I knew that there were people who often had this experience out there, but I was really horrified when I literally experienced it myself.
I got a flower from a stranger and something was wrong. After I had entered the company, I joined a small group. It was a gathering where the office workers met once a week to read or do other things together. However, I was being shy, so I felt awkward after joining there for the first time. Then I met one person who joined the group for the first time that day, and he was a very sociable type. I became strangely close to him, and after that, I started to meet him at some other place beside the day of the small group, and we had a meal or drink sometimes. He would often give me some flowers, introducing himself as a florist who works at a flower shop. For your information, we weren't dating each other at that time. But one weird thing was that he always asked me for a small amount of money whenever he gave me the flowers. And it's always been a very small amount, like 1, 5, or 10 cents. When I asked him why, then he always answered like this: "There's a superstition to all the florists. If they don't get paid for making a bouquet, they will become unhappy." I've often wondered, but I didn't know much about flowers and believed in superstitions like that, so I would take my coins from my wallet readily. I mean, it wasn't a lot of money, it was just a coin, not a big deal. One day I had to buy some flowers. Then I suddenly remembered a flower shop where he was working. Well, I better buy from someone I know since he said the flower shop is near here. However, I couldn't believe what I heard when I finally got there. He was not there, and the shopkeeper said that he doesn't even know about him. He was not working here. Suddenly, I felt uncomfortable. The bad feelings got worse, that I realized that he had always taken cash from me. So after I came back home, I searched the internet and went to the shaman with the flowers that he gave me. When I showed his picture on the cell phone and talked about him, she said, "I think he put his bad luck into the flowers and gave them to you. What he got money from you was that he had an intention that he's trying to do business with you. It's hard to just hand the bad luck over to someone who doesn't know. But it is said that the money in someone's wallet contains some of his or her luck. So if you receive it, you get someone's luck and it becomes like a deal. In other words, you bought his bad luck." She also told me that there was a lot of bad energy in both of my hands and my head, and actually, I had been having a lot of nightmares and suffering headaches at that time. She said to burn all the flowers in the house as soon as possible. "Bring me everything if you receive any from him." She also told like this, and as soon as I came back home, I packed the flowers and the book that he had given me, went back to the shaman, and we decided to burn things together on the spot. While I was passing over the stuff, I suddenly found the part of the book was fixed with a tape. I slowly took it off and there was a dried grass flower in it. I got goosebumps in an instant. I didn't want to get involved with him anymore. So after returning from the shaman's house, I left the group and blocked his number. However, he somehow contacted me for the next 3 months. He would text me calmly, asking me when I would meet him, why I left the group, and even saying, "The weather is so nice and I will send flowers for you." I was so horrified by his attitude, so I changed the number after that, and there was no more contact from him afterward. Fortunately, I didn't have nightmares, and the headache disappeared as if nothing had happened before. And since that day, I never received anything from a stranger.
When I was around 8 years old, I transferred to another school in the middle of the summer. Because I was so young at that time, I was able to get along with my classmates quickly. One day, all the girls left the class for their prior engagements, and the boys asked me to join them to go somewhere, saying they had found something interesting. I followed them through the paddy fields behind the school, and there was a 3-story house that had been deserted a long time ago. School finished early that day, so the sun was still up. The exterior of the house was not too scary except for a broken window. Well, nothing here. 5 of my friends and I went inside and we saw the window broken on the stairs leading up to the 2nd floor. I thought it was just an ordinary restaurant when I saw it from outside. But as soon as I went up to the 2nd floor, I could say that it was definitely someone's house. But the weird thing was that the inside was so cold that it was almost freezing, although it was sunny and especially hot that day. And all the furniture was standing upside down. We then came into the main room and one of my friends found a wallet on top of a pile of furniture. When he opened it up, there was a resident registration card and cash inside. I suddenly got goosebumps, so I asked him to put the wallet down and turn my eyes to the living room for a moment. And it was exactly that moment. It wasn't clearly visible, but there was a woman's silhouette in a long dress dancing in the living room. She was jumping up and down, swinging her arms from side to side, and that was the creepiest scene I've ever seen before. We were the only people in this house. So being surprised, I looked at my friends and looked back into the living room again, and there was no one there anymore. "Guys, I'm scared. We should leave." I told my friends and they got scared too, so they followed right after me. The moment we got out of the main room, the door suddenly slammed shut. What was that? One of the friends tried to open the door, but it didn't open, as if it was locked. Just then, I realized the other one who had found the wallet was still holding it. And we all screamed and ran downstairs. As soon as we were about to go home, someone began to make a fuss about that he'd left his shoe bag upstairs. We had no choice but to decide the people to go back inside by playing rock, paper, scissors. Eventually, I was the one who lost, so I had to go upstairs with him. But as soon as we went up, we couldn't say any words and couldn't believe what we just saw. The bedroom door was open. We couldn't even think of bringing back the shoe bag. We just had to run downstairs in a rush with a loud scream. The next day, I came back home after playing outside with my friends as usual, and that evening, I heard my friend who took the wallet was in a car accident on his way home by bicycle. Unfortunately, he was not seriously injured. However, I didn't feel good about it anyway. So a few days later, we ended up heading back to the deserted house to return the wallet. And there was something inside. I can tell you that there was literally nothing in the living room or on the 2nd floor when we first went there. However, now there was a baby doll hanging on the light. I will never forget that experience my whole life.
True scary story about my teacher's memory. I want to talk about the incident that my art teacher experienced in person. When she was a high school student, there was a girl whose mother was a shaman, and there were a lot of rumors about her that she literally can see the ghosts. She would always space out and often had seizures while attending classes. So she eventually had no friends around her, and even the teachers didn't touch her or care for her. One day they went on a school trip. When they arrived at their room, everyone went outside, and my teacher was also playing around with her friends, leaving her alone in the room. A few minutes later, my teacher suddenly heard the girl's shrill scream. She jumped back into the room in surprise, but other teachers and students were already standing in front of the door and blocking her sight. No one dared to enter the room. They just stood there in fear. My teacher, who was puzzled at that time, eventually pushed through the crowd and headed forward. And she could not believe what she was watching. The girl was standing upside down while foaming at the mouth and crying loudly. However, something was a little bit weird. She was not standing by herself. It was like someone had grabbed her both ankles and lifted them up. Her legs stretched straight and her face was pressed down on the floor. My teacher often says that she still remembered that day so vividly as what happened just yesterday. What was it that got that girl's ankle that day? Still, I have no idea.
When I was a kid, I visited my grandmother's house with my younger brother in the middle of summer. Like all the children, I was having a good time wandering around or playing in the valley. After the sun went down, I was talking to my grandmother while we were having dinner together, and she suddenly said like this, "Do not go out of this house late at night." Her face looked really serious. Her warning without a reason was weird to me at first, and it was a little scary for me being a young child, but soon I thought it was because the outside was too dark to go out and play. Because my grandmother's house was located in the countryside, we had to ride our bikes for almost 30 minutes to go to the nearest convenience store, and there was no street lamp on the road, so it was pitch black. After eating dinner, my brother and I went to bed. At about 1 a.m., my brother suddenly started whining that he wants ice cream. I recalled my grandmother's words not to go out at night. However, I suddenly wanted to have some ice cream too. I mean, what can I do? We ended up riding a bike together secretly and out to the town to get some ice cream. After finishing ice cream, we were on our way back home. We were riding our bikes on the road, chattering about Pokemon, which was popular at the time. Then all of a sudden, my brother told me like this, "Hey, the shortcut is over there." However, it was so dark around that I couldn't see the way that he pointed. And I don't know why, but I did not want to go that way. "Nah, let's just go back the way we came." As soon as I said that and looked forward, I could see my brother in front of me who I thought was behind me. What the? The moment I realized sent a chill down my spine. Then who was it who's been talking behind me? It was that very moment that I remembered my grandmother's words. "Do not go out of this house late at night." Sweating like a pig, I pedaled vigorously on my bicycle as best I could and arrived at my grandma's house. I started to get off my bike in a hurry, and then I heard a sudden voice coming from my ear at that very moment. Too bad." I dragged my brother's wrist, went back to our room, and ended up staying all night covered in a blanket. The next day, we kept the fact that we went out at night yesterday under wraps while we were eating breakfast, and we took a bus to go back home. What the heck was that voice yesterday? Being curious, I started to look around carefully while I was sitting next to the window, and finally, the bus passed where I'd been yesterday. And at that very moment, I froze. It was a cliff. What would have happened if I headed for a shortcut because of the voice that I heard from behind on that day? Even now, whenever I visit my grandma's house, I still think about that moment and get goosebumps.
My mom passed away a year ago due to a kidney problem. She had suffered in pain a lot while she was sick, and she ended up dying at home in front of me and my grandparents. That moment was tragic, and it hurt me and my family a lot. Since her death, I've been having a lot of nightmares and problems with sleeping at night. And last week, I was in my bedroom sleeping next to my cat, and I suddenly felt like I was being pushed on my bed, like someone was trying to suffocate me. I couldn't move or scream at all. Since it was totally dark inside, so I couldn't see who was doing that to me, I was so scared. Not long after, I don't know how, but I eventually managed to free myself. I took my cat and tried to rush towards my door, but for some reason I couldn't open the door, although it wasn't locked up at all. I froze on the spot. I ended up kicking it roughly and suddenly it opened. When I was about to go out of my bedroom, I looked back at my bed and then saw a figure with a white bedsheet on top. You know, just like that ghost that appears on the movies in general. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. So I ran to my grandparents to tell them everything I saw, but only my grandma was there. She asked me, "Where's your grandpa anyway?" All of a sudden, we heard his voice. He was in the room that used to be my mom's. And to our surprise, he was speaking with somebody, like chatting and laughing with a person. And we could recognize the voice. It was my mom. However, instead of feeling happy to hear my mom's voice, it made me terrified. I don't know the reason. The next day, I was reminiscing about yesterday, and I remember that when we lived in another house that we believed was haunted, my mom used to joke with my grandfather. She would put a white sheet on her head to scare him just for fun, and that literally hit me at that moment. Then, who was it? Was my mom trying to suffocate me and kill me? Or maybe it was someone else. I'll never know forever. All I know is as soon as the quarantine is over, I will get some psychological help.
The early mannequin is said to have been made a pose using a real human corpse and then placed it in a plaster mold. Human flesh and blood contain the most ideal proportion of nutrients that humans need. In general, these foods taste very delicious. Animals have evolved to feel the most terrible smell of dead bodies, instead of the same taste, in order to prevent extinction through eating each other. So if you can't feel the smell, you will feel that human flesh is delicious. Meanwhile, the human sense of smell has been rapidly weakening over the past few hundred years due to deterioration caused by environmental pollution, disease, and a change in the way of survival competition. The human brain emits endorphins, one of the drug ingredients, in order to maintain control of the body when the pain reaches its limit, and to make people forget the pain and feel pleasure. It's a pretty famous story that a hanged person is smiling at the last minute. Meanwhile, research from the University of Maryland found that many people who fainted from extreme pain often take their own lives after being rescued. There's a small cave on the Scandinavian peninsula in Europe, and the cave runs endlessly. A guy went into the cave to find the end of the cave, but he went missing. And 4 years later, the man is said to have been contacted in Mexico. There was a strange statue called a crying Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva is a Buddha who protects hell in Buddhist terms. He usually looks peaceful, but sometimes he looks like a crying or troubled face in the evening. When it was crying, it rained the next day, and when it was in trouble, it snowed. On a day when nothing came down, the face of the statue was the same, so it was used to set up a schedule for the next day by watching it. One day, the statue had a bright smile that had never been seen before. It was August 4th, 1945, the day before the incident about the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. In 1998, a blueprint believed to be about 400 years old was discovered from a warehouse in a private residence in the UK. The blueprint, titled Automatic Calendar, had the dimensions of the bizarrely shaped part and the assembly strategies. When an engineer carried out the restoration of the device on the basis of its design, a machine displaying AD and a date was completed. But there was an odd flaw in this device. By the time had passed the year 2050, the tooth wheels did not engage with each other, and the device suddenly stopped displaying the date. There was a famous man in a restaurant called Milan in New York, who always suddenly appeared and told strange stories to customers that they had never heard of. When he was out of sight, the customers began to talk about that man. However, no one could remember his face and even the stories that they'd been hearing from him.
I'm 19 years old and a high school student. I have a brother who is 17 years old now, and he often does creepy things recently. One day I was watching TV with my brother in the living room, and he suddenly started yelling. Shit, stop it. You think this is funny? It was kind of strange because my brother usually doesn't curse and get angry like that. What's wrong? I asked, and he replied, hey, go to your room and you can come out maybe 30 minutes later. What's wrong with you all of a sudden? Well, I'm not kidding. Go inside, hurry. Being scared, I went into my room, lay down listening to an MP3 player, and fell asleep. The next morning, I was woken up by my parents. We have to go to the hospital right now. I asked what was going on, and it turns out that my parents found my brother was lying with bubbles in his mouth when they came back home after closing the store. They ended up taking him to the hospital, having a test, but there was nothing wrong with him eventually. The doc said it was just a sudden case. I felt something really odd at this point. Why did he send me into the room so abruptly? There was once my brother had caught a bad cold, and after that he's been changed a little bit. And one day he was playing with his computer and suddenly came to my room saying like this, "Hey, aren't you feeling chilly?" Before I asked my brother why, I kept getting goosebumps behind my neck. Don't know the reason yet. Then he continued, "If you want to look behind, do not close your eyes, okay?" Why? I don't know, just someone told me. Shrugging, he went out of the room again, and I thought he was a little bit weird. He was hospitalized for a few days and finally came back home. Why did you pass out that day anyway? His expression suddenly changed as soon as I asked about what happened that day. And what he said followed was just pure horror itself. Actually, I've been seeing strange things since I was in middle school. What do you mean? Do you remember that day when we were watching TV? I told you to go into your room? And the reason I told you like that was, I saw 3 women that day in the living room, holding their hands and kept spinning around you. I had goosebumps all of a sudden. But when you get up and about to enter the room, they started to follow you. He told me that he then continued to hit the floor with his palm to prevent them. Then they looked at my brother, smiling widely, and suddenly approached him. You know what they said to me when you went into your room? He was laughing, saying like this. What did they say? Want to join? We are all thirsty. He said the reason the ghosts said they were thirsty was that they wanted the human's life. Anyway, he started to curse at them indiscriminately, but suddenly his body did not move. Then one of the women approached him. Her face had changed into a grotesque look, like exactly the same as a ghost in the movie Ju-on, and she was smiling at him. In front of my frightened brother, she moved her face closer to him and started licking his face with her black tongue. He ended up passing out. That's what he told me. Even when he was in the hospital, he had the same nightmare, and he had sleep paralysis for a while. This incident is what my aunt experienced when she was a high school student. She went to school camping one day. You know, there is often a student who does not get along well with the classmate and plays alone in each class. And there was such one classmate in my aunt's class. Honestly, she was not an outcast, but always left out because she couldn't get along with his friends. This time again, she went around alone at the camping. My aunt was sharing a room with her. Not thinking much about her, the last night of the camping finally came. All the classmates were all sleeping in the room, and all of a sudden my aunt opened her eyes for no reason. The beds in the room were all bunk beds at that time, and as soon as my aunt, who was sleeping on the second floor, turned her head to the side, she saw her classmate looking down at her. Being surprised, she pushed her shoulder and said, "Hey, you surprised me. Why did you wake up?" Her body turned a full circle around. Then she looked at my aunt again without a word, and when she pushed her again, her body circled again. "What's wrong with you?" This time my aunt yelled, but she was just staring at her. The other friends woke up one by one at the sound of her yell, and as soon as one of them turned on the light, everyone in the room screamed. Her classmate eventually committed suicide by hanging herself from the ceiling. My aunt ended up fainting on the spot that day. 2. The guilt. Last summer, me and a few of my friends went to a valley together. while everyone was playing inside the valley, having fun, a girl who was a friend of my friend accidentally fell into the deep water. At first I was about to go inside and save her, but the other boys stopped me. We couldn't dare to save her, so we just stood there watching her, and she eventually died there. In the panic of this situation, we all ended up deciding to cover it up. After that, we went back and told her parents that she eventually went missing while walking around that area alone. Everyone started pretending to ignore everything about her after that. I literally want to spread this accident, but this is the only place that I can talk about it. I feel massive guilty when I keep thinking about her, and as much as I think about that day, I want to just kill myself. And she's been appearing in my dreams recently. 3. My cousin. I think I can confess it because it's anonymous. When I was a child, I pushed my cousin just for fun. However, he ended up hurting his head severely, and later became a disabled person who even couldn't speak properly. Anyone in my family knows that I did it because nobody was there at the time. It's just they didn't even notice, and no one thought I was the one who did it. But then he started to cry whenever he sees me. My mom and other relatives thinks it's just because he misses me, and I was the only person who played with him a lot and spent most of the time when we were young. However, there is one thing I have to tell you. I don't feel guilty. Never. I guess I have a problem with myself.
I used to work at one company for about a year before I entered the company I'm working at currently. I was living alone with my wife. Although we both like kids, we weren't ready yet. Anyway, it was one night and I was heading home being drunk as usual after finishing a get-together. Passing through the front door of the apartment, I pressed the button to get on the elevator, and the elevator that was stopped on the third basement level began to climb slowly. Finally, the elevator arrived on the first floor, and I felt cold as soon as I walked inside. It was almost 12 o'clock and my body was getting hot by the effects of alcohol, but I could definitely feel chilly inside the elevator. Well, I guess it's because the elevator stayed deep underground for a while, I thought, and then pressed the 16th floor button where I live. The elevator started moving slowly. However, it suddenly stopped on the 5th floor. Normally, the people in my apartment didn't take the elevator very often at the time, so I was standing in the middle of the elevator. As soon as the door opened, I stepped aside. But no one was standing there. I thought someone who was impatient must have pressed the button and then just went up to the emergency exit stairs. So I pressed the close button and the elevator stopped again on the 6th floor. And there's no one there either. When the elevator stopped on the 7th floor, I suddenly got angry. "Hey, stop!" I stuck my head out the door and shouted. But I didn't feel any human presence upstairs. A sudden shudder passed over me, but still I thought it was someone's prank. The elevator then stopped again on the 8th floor while going up, but this time there was a little girl standing in front of the door. She seemed like she was about 6 or 7 years old, but you know what was a strange thing about her? Despite the late hours, there was no one around her. Like parents, someone like that. But this kid just stood there still without getting on. "Hey kid, are you gonna get in?" I asked, but she didn't answer. As soon as I felt chill somewhere, I soon pressed the close button of the elevator. Just as the door was closing halfway through, she pressed the open button again. The short kid standing on tiptoes opened the elevator door, so I told her again to get inside. However, she still stood there without answering. Just at that time, I thought this was the one who's been playing pranks on me. So I pointed my finger at the CCTV and yelled at her not to prank anymore. Then the girl staring at me slowly opened her mouth. "I'll get in when my mom comes," she answered in a small voice. But I couldn't see any shadow of people no matter how much I looked around. But somehow her voice seemed really dark and creepy. It wasn't a childlike voice at all. I pressed the close button again roughly, and fortunately the kid didn't press the open button this time. The elevator started going up again and didn't stop on the next floor. With a sigh of relief, I just wanted to get off and get home as soon as possible. It was at that very moment. I was on the 11th floor and the light suddenly started blinking. I was staring at the light with a nervous mind, and something was strange with it. There was some spot on the light that was stained, as if someone had dropped black ink, and to my surprise, it was getting bigger and bigger every time the light went on and off. It can't be. I'm imagining because I drank too much. I kept repeating it inside, but the stains grew bigger and bigger as if it was teasing me. Although I was sweating on my back, it was still chilly inside the elevator, and the moment I looked at the light and then looked straight front this time, I couldn't help but doubt my eyes. There, I could see a person's hand reflected on my back. Seriously? I was the only one in this elevator. After having confidence that there's an unknown thing that exists here, I was seized with extreme fear. The time to go up to the 16th floor was like an eternity. I couldn't hold my fear back. I eventually pressed the button to get off the 14th floor. I was about to pop out as soon as the door opened, but I had to stop suddenly. The girl I saw on the 8th floor was standing there, like she was waiting for me. I felt like my heart was sinking. Shivering, just as I was about to get off, she raised her head slowly. At that moment, I saw it. Unlike before, she was smiling brightly, as if her mouth was going to be ripped soon. "My mom is here now. I'm going to get in." Mom? What's she talking about? I'm sure the elevator was empty from the basement floor. Besides, not even a small rat was to be seen, let alone a human while I was inside. Then, who is it? I was strained to the limit, and my legs were trembling. I almost pushed the child and ran out of the elevator to the emergency stairs. For some reason, I was afraid that I'd never see my wife again if I stayed here. I was going up the stairs frantically. Just then, the sensor at the emergency exit started turning on much faster than my speed. It's like someone was already going up. I was about to go insane. When I finally reached the 16th floor, I flung the emergency door open and rushed out of. I turned. I tried to run toward my house, and then someone was standing in front of the house. The woman with incredibly long hair and the girl I saw at the elevator. They were there. How the heck did they know my house? I didn't know what was going on right now, but only one thing came to my mind for a moment. I must not go back home now. I barely managed to turn back and carefully twisted the emergency door again. And at that moment, my sweaty hand just slipped and the door clanked in the quiet hallway. The moment I looked into the hallway with a desire to cry, I suddenly heard a sound from the end of the hall. It was the sound of a woman's shoes and baby shoes. I pushed the emergency exit door. While I ran frantically downstairs, I could hear the shoe sounds behind me at regular intervals. Almost rolling over myself, I went down through the front door and then rushed into the lighted security office. However, the security guard was just patrolling his round at that time, so he was not there. I lifted my trembling body and looked at the front door through the small window in the front. And at that moment, I felt my legs weaken. A woman and a child didn't come out of the front door, but they were glaring at me fiercely, as if they were going to kill me. I was about to scream, but just then, the guard came into the office. He got surprised to see me trembling and asked me what was going on. I tried to explain by pointing my hand at the front door, but then I realized that there was no one. Eventually, the security guard came to my house with me. To my surprise, my wife, who thought she was asleep already, was waiting for me with the lights on. And what my wife told me was a surprise itself. She said that someone rang our doorbell when I was seeing the woman and kid in front of my house. My wife thought it was me out there, so she walked to the front door to open it. But then she felt something wasn't right, because whenever I came home late at night after dinner, I always acted more carefully instead of ringing the bell. So my wife turned on the intercom and looked out. But there was no one. And when she returned to her seat, the bell rang again, and the same situation repeated on and on. So this time she was looking closely at the screen when the moment the bell rang without putting down the phone. And there was the face of the woman who filled the screen to the full. At first, it's like someone was sticking her face on the screen intentionally. But when my wife looked closely, her face looked so pale, as if it were dead already. She urgently turned on all the light right away and tried to call the administration office. However, the guard didn't answer because he was just on patrol and at that time. And I was running downstairs like crazy. When my wife saw the intercom screen again, it was already gone. The next day's morning, I went to the security office to check the elevator CCTV, and I couldn't keep my mouth closed for a while in a panic. On CCTV, I could see that I was waiting for the elevator on the first floor. I stepped inside. Nothing happened at first. However, I suddenly started to press the buttons from 5th to 8th floors as if I were possessed by something. There was literally no one on the 7th floor, but I screamed into the air, and when the door opened on the 8th floor, I murmured something and then pressed the door's button to open. I pointed at the CCTV and said something and then finally pressed the close button. Furthermore, I was gazing on the elevator lights for a while. Then I suddenly pressed the button on the 14th floor and ran out. So that means I was doing something really weird by myself. The CCTV on the front door also captured only me. No one came out. The guard laughed at me and my wife, saying that we saw imaginary things. But the feelings I felt at that moment were so real. It was so vivid. Who the heck were that woman and the child? Still, I have no idea.